Hello and welcome into the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, TJ Mabardi. We are coming to you live today with an action-packed episode. Today is September 11th on Wednesday afternoon, and we are going to be sort of wrapping up our Week 1 NFL thoughts here as we turn the page onto Week 2, although the Pittsburgh Steelers are seemingly running it back a little bit at the quarterback position from Week 1 to Week 2, where Russell Wilson is still listed as the team's number one quarterback, but for a second consecutive week, it will be Justin Fields seemingly starting the game. We'll give you the latest updates on that Russell Wilson injury and what sort of dynamics start to come into play here for Justin Fields as he could potentially, if he plays well enough, maybe even steal the starting job away from Wilson. So we'll talk about that interesting dynamic, and then we are going to be giving out grades to every first-round rookie that played this past week, and we will be discussing their upsides, and then we are going to be giving a tier list for a little bit of an NFL power rankings headed into Week 2, so you'll want to make sure that you tune in for that. And then to cap off the show, we're going to be moving away from the NFL briefly here actually, and touching on some of the news that we haven't had time to talk about these past couple days, but over the weekend, the Denver Nuggets agreed to a contract extension with point guard Jamal Murray, so we will be breaking down the details of that deal. But before we get into everything, just a reminder to like, follow, subscribe wherever you keep up with us. To any of our viewers, be sure to use the comment section to give us your thoughts on the latest happenings in sports. We here at the GSMC Sports Network really appreciate any sort of feedback or engagement that we can get with our viewers. So if you have a quick comment or a thoughtful question or anything in between, be sure to let us know in the comment section, and we will try to address as much as we possibly can. If you would like to become a bigger part of the show, you can also use the super chat feature that is available on YouTube by leaving a comment alongside with a tip or donation. Your comment will pop up on screen for everyone to see, or you could do so using the link that is streaming across the bottom ticker. That is gsmcpodcast.net. Anything would be very greatly appreciated on either end there. The Pittsburgh Steelers are now preparing to move forward into Week 2, still with Russell Wilson on the sideline and Justin Fields starting as quarterback one. Now, Russell Wilson, of course, was the starting quarterback coming out of training camp, and it was expected to be that way, although we then saw him go down with a calf injury, believed to be the same calf injury that was holding him out of practice early on in the training camp, we're having some technology issues here, but the Pittsburgh Steelers are planning on moving forward with Justin Fields as their starting quarterback for this upcoming week, while Russell Wilson remains sidelined with a calf injury, a similar calf injury that held him out of the beginning of training camp as well. Now, the Steelers named Wilson quarterback one headed into the regular season, but late last week, he ended up suffering an injury that sidelined him for the game, and Justin Fields ended up starting in his place, and ultimately I thought Wilson played pretty well, all things considered, to help lead the Steelers to a win in that game. He wasn't spectacular necessarily, but he did just enough throughout the game to keep the Steelers moving. And ultimately, yes, you would absolutely like to see him be able to punch it in the end zone every once in a while, but ultimately, Fields was pretty efficient through the air, 17 of 23. Again, it's not like he lit the world on fire with his passing stats, but he was more than good enough, in my opinion, and I do think that it makes things a little bit interesting here moving forward, considering the fact that already Fields and Wilson were competing for this starting spot throughout training camp. Now, I was always sort of in the camp that Justin Fields should be the starter, so I'm sort of already coming at it through that lens. But either way, this was a little bit of a neck-and-neck competition, it seemed like, and ultimately, I think that more than anything, Wilson was able to hold on to the starting job a little bit based off of the politics of the fact that they probably had some sort of agreement with Wilson when they signed him as a free agent, that he was going to get his opportunity, a little bit of a redemption story after what was, of course, a couple very disappointing seasons in Denver. And it seemed like this was sort of his shot at redemption, bouncing back, and ultimately Justin Fields sort of fell into their lap anyways during the offseason. And I think that the pecking order was just a little bit skewed based off of that fact that Russell Wilson was technically available to them first, and they sort of were going off of that assumption that they had already made the agreement with Wilson that he could have the starting job. But I do believe that Fields adds a little bit more of a dynamic aspect to the Steelers' offense, and he showcased that a little bit in this past week's game against the Falcons. Just 57 yards on the ground, but he was able to pick up a 3rd and long with his legs, and ultimately, is he a perfect player? No, but I think that this is a Steelers offense that isn't necessarily the most talented in the NFL, but could be good in different areas. They're going to need their offensive line to continue to step up. I thought they did a pretty good job, all things considered, week 1 against the Falcons. They had looked shakier during the preseason, so liked to see that against what is an up-and-coming defensive roster on the other end in Atlanta. But additionally, I think that it was really interesting to see how all of this is playing out from the perspective of Russell Wilson as well, because he is somebody